if you were a Palestinian trying to get out of the Gaza Strip, generally speaking, you don't have a hope in hell of starting a life outside of the Gaza Strip. You are genuinely imprisoned in your own land, basically. From the maritime point of view, you don't have a hope in hell of leaving. You'll be killed by the Israeli Navy if you try and sail out of the Gaza Strip. So this illegal besiegement policy under international law, on the face of it, constitutes an illegal policy of collective punishment, because most of the population are children. And Israel is treating all of this population of 1.6 million as responsible for the actions of some Palestinians inside Gaza, who Israel doesn't like. And so it constitutes an illegal siege under international law. The effect of this has been to certainly totally slow down any economic growth, but in some sectors to actually de-develop the Palestinian economy, totally suffocating any norm of economic life or any norm of livelihood that Palestinians would otherwise be able to achieve. So, to put it in informal language, it's not looking good, and it's been like this for thousands of days. As I said, Palestinians are basically imprisoned in their own land. The average Palestinian is impoverished and we can say is in a position of absolute insecurity, and this is the main fundamental thing which is breached in terms of Palestinian human rights. Palestinians in Gaza, on average, suffer from absolute insecurity, physical insecurity as a result of Israeli state violence, economic insecurity as a result of the blockade, and what I call historical insecurity, not knowing what's going to happen to your children, grandchildren, not knowing what's going to happen to your extended family, not knowing what's going to happen to Gaza itself with the besiegement and the embattled status, and not knowing what's going to happen with the whole so-called conflict at large, whether or not your grandparents, for example, their homes will ever be accessible to you in other parts of the once Holy Land, what Western Christians call the Holy Land, 1948 Palestine, Palestine before the creation of Israel, the bits of Palestine that are now Israel, whether those will ever be accessible to Palestinians. So there is, if you like, a full spectrum insecurity for Palestinians. So Palestinians grow up with a real sense in Gaza of imprisonment in their own land. And generally speaking, they also cannot move to other parts of Palestine, for example, East Jerusalem and the West Bank. Under particular exceptions, they are able to leave the Gaza Strip. For example, out of academic excellence, they may be able to get a scholarship if they're lucky and travel to the West, for example. But obviously this is a fraction of the Palestinians in Gaza. And also there is, if you like, an extreme medical exception as well, but in some cases Palestinians will be able to leave to get medical treatment in Israel or in Egypt or in other parts of the world. But I can give you numerous examples of Palestinians dying in Gaza because they weren't able to leave even under extreme medical circumstances. Two cousins of one of my best friends in Gaza died in their early and mid-20s as a result of not being able to get a hospital bed in Israel. Apparently Israel run out of beds, and these two people I'm thinking about, that was the explanation given to their families after they passed away in Gaza, because they weren't able to get any normal sort of medical attention that we would take for granted as Western citizens. So the point is that this is in Arabic, to continue the struggle and the livelihood, or the will or momentum to have a normal life and continue life the best one can, and to try and find a sense of normalcy within one's life and try to develop a livelihood and look forward to the graduation, the birth, the wedding, and etc., etc., etc. And if you go to the family homes of those that can afford it, or if you go to the restaurants, you'll see maps like this, or tapestries in this case. And this is not the Gaza Strip. Gaza Strip is on the corner next to the sea there, but this is the whole historic Palestine, the 1948 Palestine. And therefore it's very symbolically important, and there is, I would assert, certainly a general widespread sentimental relationship with the fact that the whole territory, the original 1948 Palestine, is certainly, morally speaking, Palestinians. And I would say, I would go as far to say that I believe that most Palestinians, when the conflict is finally resolved, and hopefully that will be yesterday, would at least expect an assertion that this land is basically theirs morally, and that it was actually stolen 65 years ago, at the very least, whether or not they would ever be able to get any of it back, more than the 25% given to them by the law. or not is a different matter, but at least the moral assertion that it's our land, so to speak. And I mentioned earlier that there is obviously a situation with the children suffering the most from this. Well, youth unemployment, for example, is over 75%, adult unemployment is over 60%. According to the Gazan mental health programs, all children, literally all children, show the signs of psychological disturbance as a result of the recent wars and the incursions and the besiegement, etc., the suffocation of normal life, the total insecurity I was talking about. As I say, all children, according to the programs, suffer from psychological disturbances. And my experience, as you'll hear later, of the psychological situation as a result of being in this kind of situation, this war zone, testifies to that, which is that everyone suffers from some sort of psychological problem to an extent as a result of being entrapped, if you will, in this situation. If you go down to the marina area in West Gaza City, in the north quadrant of the Gaza Strip, looks pretty pleasant, right? But the point is that this water is extremely contaminated. The Mediterranean water off the Gazan coast, basically for children, of course, we can't really stop children from swimming in seawater. If you're living in a war zone, it's one of the only sources of entertainment or leisure. If you meet the fishermen down at this area, as I said, there are about 3,500 of them in the Gaza Strip as a whole. Many of them will be extremely well educated, many are self-subsistence to support their families and etc. And as I said, they're doing actually a very insecure job, very dangerous violence. But the on the Gaza Strip comes from, I said already that there are F-16s in the Israeli Air Force arsenal. There are also F-15s, drones, and Apache gunship helicopters, all paid for by yours truly, the American tax dollar. Are there any questions on the background at this point?
How did they, you said almost all of them have PhD?
Sorry. Oh, there's actually a microphone, so.
Will be recorded, so you have to get the printer on now. Get right?
Yeah.
You mentioned a lot of the adults have PhDs. I was just wondering how they have access to that. Are they through websites? Or?
No, there are universities in Gaza. And in fact, the education, certainly in recent years, has been developed to an extent that actually it's one of the sources for hope. That those that can afford to progress to higher education do so, and it's academically excellent. I mean, I taught English in Gaza, etc. The level of dedication and everything far exceeds a Western standard of academic dedication among students at university. I mean, it's actually extremely expensive. I'm not sure in comparison to an American standard, but certainly by a European standard, it's basically comparable in absolute terms, extremely expensive. But obviously this is something which is important for the future, so families save up to provide education for their kids.
Oh, so because if so many are unemployed, they have to just base
exactly.
On savings.
It's if you like, something for the economic elite. But there are about 6 universities in Gaza, and some of them are excellent. I hope that answers the question. Yeah. There's a question. I will just take this one and then...
Okay. You keep talking about this is illegal, they are doing, and we know that it's illegal. Even when the ships came with medical supplies to help the Gaza people, the Israeli commandos went in and killed them and all of this stuff. How come they can't be responsible? Where are the international law?
Well, I guess maybe we can talk about this at the end, because at the moment I just want to talk about the specific background situation and the blockade and etc. Are there any questions about that, actually? Okay.
Can I ask you, how many kind of aid organizations are working there right now? I know Save the Children works there.
Yeah.
Are there any other... how many other types of organizations like that are working in the Gaza Strip?
Well, there are dozens. I mean, and the Palestinian population are basically enforced into a position of aid dependency, which is obviously to an extent humiliating, because actually they don't need aid. to survive. They just need the political blockade to be lifted so that they can have a normal economic life. As I mentioned to the young lady with the situation about the educational determination, the determination is steadfast, and they're receiving 8 handouts, and more than 60 wouldn't need to be in place if the blockade. So, could someone tell me actually, what is the general Western mainstream news media about how the recent 8-day war, was ignited, so to speak?
Well, the Palestinians started it, of course.
Of course. How?
They fired rockets at Israel.
Exactly.
Repeatedly.
Exactly.
For the last year.
So over the last few months, Palestinian groups, particularly Hamas, was responsible for firing hundreds of rockets over the internationally designated border inside Israel, targeting Israeli civilians, causing damage and casualty, etc. The pretense. Now, the Palestinian understanding of history and understanding of the lead-up to that operation is basically wiped off the map in terms of Western mainstream media coverage. So I will put it back on the map now. 6 days before Israel's self-defense operation began, he was killed by Israeli force. At the time, there were tanks, helicopters, and snipers around the position, something which Palestinians are used to in the area. Hamid was playing football on this Thursday evening with his schoolmates, something that he did every week. He was an avid Real Madrid supporter. The shrapnel that killed him caused a 2mm hole to go through his, another one to come out at the top left of his torso. 2mm holes, tiny, tiny holes. And the shrapnel basically sliced up the inside of his lungs and heart, and he died within minutes, just a couple more meters down the road in that car, in fact, our neighbour's car, on the way to hospital. At the time, he'll get a tanker, etc. Myself, I was within hundreds of meters of Hamid's home by a matter of coincidence. It's also a matter of coincidence that the gentleman sitting over here is related to him. But when we were there, me and my crew, we heard the force that killed Hamid, and we don't ourselves also know from what military unit it came from. But as I said, there were 2 helicopters in the air. There was a sniper outpost in his home, which his family had been subjected to for years. And there were also Israeli military vehicles. What we were documenting at the time, Israeli military incursions into that area, that civilian area. So Hamid died moments later on the way to hospital, as I said. His family considers that he was murdered. He was either certainly murdered or recklessly killed by the Israeli military, one or the other, and they have refused to explain how this happened. They refused to talk to me, the spokespersons, on this topic. So this is another Palestinian now being killed for no reason, with no explanation, with no justification, etc. At the time, there were no Palestinian resistance fighters in the area, and etc. I hope you can see that these are 2 of the children among others playing football with him outside his home on that Thursday, 6 days before the self-defense operation began. And I hope you can see that they're suffering from a clear psychological trauma, post-traumatic stress disorder, and etc. And having spent time with these children, with the teachers, with the family of Hamid, and etc., it's clear to me that certainly the children are suffering from really psychological disturbance to a real extent. Apparently they now have basically no academic performance in comparison to before. The mothers of the children that witnessed Hamid being killed say that the children are basically totally messed up, to put it in informal language, as a result of witnessing their best friend being killed in front of them. So this was 6 days before the self-defense operation started. So obviously in the Western media you will hear about the rockets being fired into Israel and etc., like the lady talked about. And after Hamid was killed, Palestinian terrorist groups, according to the Israeli and Western narrative, Palestinian resistance groups, according to the Palestinian, 4 hours after Hamid were fired, so to speak, had Hamid's name on them. They were fired in retaliation for the killing of this innocent that went without any other mention or justice, or whatever you want to call it. And so that is the relationship from the Palestinian point of view, that the rockets being fired into Israel go to the verb, the word that the Palestinians use is answer the Israeli violence, the aggression against Gaza. That's how it's understood by Palestinians in Gaza. So this was 6 days, as I said, before the self-defense operation began. This was on the Thursday Hamid was killed. The operation started on the following Wednesday. So what happened in that weekend in between is that more Palestinian children were killed, a 15-year-old and a 16-year-old, and Israel, from the Palestinian narrative again, committed another massacre over that weekend, targeting a civilian area, which we'll now hear about. We'll watch a video I made documenting what happened on that Saturday and Sunday. As I said, from the Palestinian point of view, Israel committed a massacre which was bound to elicit more rocket fire into Israel by the groups, etc. So we'll watch this now. I have to apologize to anyone that's already seen the video, which is possible if any of you watch my work online and etc. So please forgive me, but it's important that we go through it, so to speak. Another thing that I would like to disclaim is that when you hear what's said in the video, and I'm talking particularly about the interviewees, you're catching them at moments of extreme emotional height, if you like, in the sense that, for example, they are interviewed, the family members of those slain are interviewed outside the mortuary where their relatives are in the fridges, or outside the family homes where their relatives are about to be proceeded from for burial, etc. So it's not a normal psychological time, and so please be aware of that when you watch and listen to what they say.
On Saturday evening and Sunday morning, Israel launched an escalation of violence on the Gaza Strip. It's Saturday evening and we're in a taxi driving toward the scene of a reported attack. In Gaza at night, you don't know when or where Israel will next strike, and so our being out in the streets is dangerous. After a while, we hear Gaza being attacked. We're told either by mortars or F-16s. Omar, our taxi driver, is used to working during escalations and is relatively relaxed. The car's hazard lights are on and the taxi badge clearly displayed to make clear to Israeli forces that we're a civilian taxi.
So this is the border with Israel in front of us. You can see the lights on the horizon here and here. And we've been told by a local resident that the Israeli occupation forces are around this area. We can't hear or see anything particular at the moment, but we're going to move on for our own safety now.
Line is the border. As we drive, to our left is the boundary with Israel. The area is like a ghost town as people seek safety in their homes.
This area is very, very dangerous. No anybody here.
It's now 1 a.m. on Sunday and an ambulance crew redirects us to a medical center in the Al-Karama area of North Gaza. Drones are flying low above the medical center and neighboring mosque.
The drone is really audible to us here on the ground now. It sounds like it's right above our heads. And the paramedics have said that they keep the lights on the ambulances for their own protection, to identify themselves as paramedics, and that's why there is a group of people here. So in Gaza, the paramedics have to keep the lights on, not when they're transporting people, but just for their own safety, so that they don't get bombed.
Here we have ambulances and an emergency medical center that helps people and civilians who are targeted by Israeli airplanes and forces. We save the area from those to the south, and as you must have heard, the latest shelling took place in the east, where all the injured and martyrs were civilians, the majority children. Most of the shelling targeted young people, women, and the elderly. And the Israeli enemy is erratically targeting civilians here and there. Only innocent people fall and are injured. They do not distinguish between buildings and trees, young men, women, and the elderly. They commit crimes targeting people sitting in their own homes.
Thank God. We really enjoy doing our work because what we do and the support we give to the civilians that are injured and targeted allows us to fulfill our duty to the Palestinian people who are always being attacked in this continuous war for our people's rights. It is our duty to offer as much as possible for our people.
We were at the location of the first shelling, roaming, looking for injured people when the Israeli aeroplane shot another missile just behind us.
It might be difficult for you to see, but this glass is actually cracked, and just up here there is a dent in the ambulance.
So the paramedics told us that this place had been struck tonight. As you can see, the rubble and debris has not even been cleared yet.
Mohammed Saeed Eshkakani was a 20-year-old member of the Islamic Jihad Resistance Wing.
And this building has been structurally damaged. We can hear water leaking inside the building. It looks like it's leaking from this water tank. This is fresh blood here from the attack. I hope you can see that.
He died here on the scene. Paramedics found his body parts on the sand. On Sunday morning, I returned to the site of Mohammed Saeed's targeted assassination. The blood has been cleared up. In the last 2 days, as of 8 p.m. Gaza time, Israel has killed a confirmed 6 Gazans and injured up to 40. This morning I attended the funeral procession of Mohammed Abaid, another martyr. The 20-year-old was killed at about midnight near his home in Jabalia, North Gaza. Abaid's dead body was found at 6 a.m. Mohammed Abu Shamala was Abaid's cousin.
Our message for the enemy is that the parents are happy to sacrifice their children as martyrs. We offer more pride, dignity and solidarity to the parents and families of those injured and martyred. This is the reality of the Palestinian people. The more martyrs we give to our cause, the more we believe and stand by our cause and its resistance. They keep on killing, injuring and destroying our Palestinian people. It is our right and our duty as Palestinians to fight for our rights and to defend ourselves.
I went to the mortuary at Shifa Hospital in Gaza City. Last night in the Shajaiya area, east of Gaza City, Israel killed Ahmed al-Dardasawi, 20, Mohammed Harara, 16, Ahmed Harara, 15, Matar Abu al-Attar, 20. This is the cousin of one of the slain Harara children.
The first missile fired by Israel caused no injuries, but the second caused fatalities. The missiles didn't target the funeral itself, but an area very close to it, which is the Al-Montar area, a container in Al-Montar. All the people targeted in that area were civilians. There were no resistance members present. 4 people died from the Harara family and Abu al-Atta family and al-Dad al-Sawa family. This only makes us stronger. No matter how hard they attack, we will attack back with more and more strength, and they will be surprised with what we can do. What they are doing, it's as if our children and families are less important, but they are very precious to us. I want to tell them, don't even dare to think that you will successfully terrorize us. We will continue the fight and the resistance.
In this attack on Shajaiya, Israel injured around 30 civilians, most of whom were from the Harara family. A cousin of Mohammed Harara is a personal friend of mine. Abu Usama was at the mortuary and wanted to talk to me.
I seek refuge in the name of God, in the name of God, the most beneficent, the most merciful. Honestly, what happened last night was a massacre in every sense of the word. The shelling targeted those civilians, young people and parents who had rushed to the site of the first shelling, who were going to save those who were assumed injured, and they instead were attacked by a second Israeli enemy cell. The Israelis profited from this gathering of young men, women and children, targeting randomly. 4 of them were killed and over 30 injured. The Israeli shelling didn't target the military site, they targeted civilians, just random shelling that was aimed to maximize Palestinian civilian loss and to stop the resistance. But what we have experienced, no matter how much we sacrifice, no matter how many martyrs we lose, this is our just fight to regain our land and our rights. This will not terrorize us even if we lose more martyrs. No matter how many are injured, we will not give up. We will fight blood with blood. Martyrs will follow martyrs, and we will fight until our land is ours again.
So that's what happened at the weekend before the self-defense operation began. And there are some interesting issues which we don't really have time to talk about, but I will talk about nonetheless, which is that in North America there is even less understanding of this sort of position that is expressed, if you like, in these comments in this video about martyrdom and resistance and armed resistance and etc. 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 What may not be obvious in the video is that the Palestinians basically don't stand a chance against the Israeli military, and therefore their groups are not in any way designed to match or compete, but designed to resist. This is the understanding. And also because most people in Gaza are adherents to one of the Abrahamic faiths, there is the concept of martyrdom. In other words, when someone is killed by Israel, it's considered in Gaza that they're killed because they're Palestinian, and therefore they're a martyr to the Palestinian cause. And this is how it's totally understood in Gaza universally, actually. And if you were to say, for example, X person was killed or etc. in a particular time period, people will correct you immediately as a matter of a knee-jerk reaction, saying, well, they were not killed, they were martyred, they were shaheed. This is an absolute universal concept. And this is why it's present in the video. I think another important thing to say is that under international law, Palestinians do have a right to armed defense, including active armed resistance. The problem with the law becomes the tactics and etc. But it's explicit under international law. The Palestinians, quote-unquote, by any means necessary, can expel, quote-unquote, alien forces from their land to get their, quote-unquote, self-determination back. So it's absolutely codified in the law that Palestinians have this right. Another thing to make important, is that, to make clear, is that this is what happened just a few days before the operation started, the so-called self-defense operation. But this kind of violence inflicted on Palestinians in Gaza is not an aberration. This is absolutely normal. When I was there in Gaza for the first time during the summer period, innocent men, women and children were killed as a matter of routine over the weeks that I was there. I made reports covering incidents of people's homes being blown up because they were militants, they were civilians, with no explanation or justification given in some cases. So the Palestinians are used to this kind of state violence being inflicted against them. And this is very important because the resistance and the rocket firing and etc. Is also part of that historic experience over recent years. And so Israel launching this self-defense operation is basically entirely arbitrary. It's not linked with the Palestinians' actions or their military resistance or activity or anything like this. It's absolutely arbitrary. And that is made even clearer as a fact when you look at the fact that this military operation, this 8-day war that just happened, was actually predicted under political analysis to occur at this time. I mentioned this, some people are nodding, on the TV program yesterday, on the PATV 18. Happen at this time, this operation, if it were to happen at all, because of the domestic Israeli political situation before the upcoming Israeli election and the North American political situation with the US politics. So it was predicted to happen. And that's got nothing to do with what Palestinians do, as you can hear. That's to do with the international political situation. Explanation of what happened under these circumstances. So that's... Please.
Can I ask you something?
Of course.
Israel does things like dropping leaflets saying, stay away from the militants in Gaza, because then, you might be collateral damage. And and when they're targeted for assassination, it targets the wife and the children and everyone around them at the same time.
Yeah, of course, it's maddening. What can I say? I mean, I will talk about this actually in about 5 minutes in more detail. Of course, what can we say? I mean, the point is that sitting here in Iowa City and etc., it doesn't exactly resonate what state terrorism feels like, because the average American has it so good they can't even empathize and imagine, even if they tried, convey what it's like by explaining and showing some pictures and video and etc. But the point is that the United States and etc., I mean, it's considered by generally speaking, my Palestinian friends, that I'm in the lion's den, because this is where all of the funding comes to kill their cousins and etc. In Gaza. And hopefully we'll have time to talk about this all later, the strategic situation, how we can move forward and etc. But what can I say?
Because we're being taped, and we can't hear your questions on the tape unless you're mic'd.
Please.
Hi, I'm wondering how the militants are organized and where the rockets are coming from. Like, suppose I'm a 16-year-old and I'm angry about something, I want to fire a rocket into Israel. How do I get one? And do I have to pay for it myself, or do Egyptians pay for it, and who do I get orders from when I want to do it?
So the question, if I understand correctly, is basically how the rocket firing happens and who joins the resistance groups and etc. Well, it's got nothing to do with Egypt, that's the first thing to say. Every Palestinian political movement, of which there are about a handful predominant ones, have their own militant wings. For example, Fatah has its own, and even though it's the West's favorite among the Palestinian factions, it itself was the militant wing, was responsible for rocket firing into Israel during the 8-Day War. I will talk about this in more detail in a few moments, hopefully. But the key is that they are organized military wings. And so you don't just say, can I shoot a rocket, or etc. There is obviously a military training process and etc. For example, there are hundreds of women reservists in some of the military wings who are capable of rocket firing, hand-to-hand combat, and etc. So it is, in a sense, an organized kind of project. In a sense, it's also not organized, and hopefully we will have time to talk about that in a moment when I talk about the war and etc. But it's not something like, can I walk into a rocket shop? The rockets are made in basically garages with scrap metal, and generally speaking, the rockets are made in Gaza. 99% of them are made in Gaza with basically scrap metal. From the Palestinian narrative point of view, in comparison to Israel's 250 illegally acquired nuclear warheads, they are basically, comparatively speaking, fireworks. And so many Palestinians will say our fireworks instead of our rockets. Because statistically speaking, looking at the damage that they do in human and infrastructure, if they do any physical damage, it's very, very little. Generally, in the last 10 years, for example, less than 200 Israelis have been killed. In the same time period, thousands of Palestinians have been killed, including more than 1,000 children. The point is that there is a total asymmetry, and it's not, you can't walk into a rocket shop. I hope that answers the question.
We're looking at the map of Palestine. It's basically like Gaza and West Bank. How many families are separated by this? And I know you said it's hard as in hell to get out of Gaza. How hard is it to get from like West Bank to Gaza, Gaza to West Bank to see family and stuff like that?
I kind of hope we can talk about this at the end, actually, because at the moment I want to keep everyone up to date about the build-up to the recent war, if that's okay.
Can you talk about...
Can you wait for the mic? Sorry to be like a Hitler about this, but they could be recycled and rockets could be made from them. There is not a prohibited list of stuff which isn't allowed in. There is a permitted list. So, for example, there are some insane examples, but for example, let's say peppermint is on the prohibited list, but I don't know, let's say spearmint or sage or something is on the allowed list. And so there is some stuff is allowed in, according to the Israeli state, other stuff isn't. The whole point is that, for example, construction materials, for example, generally speaking, in a normal sense, are not allowed in comparison to the amount that they would normally to go in if the blockade wasn't in place. So the point is, in the direct answer to the question, it's all for security purposes, which is obviously some sort of ominous, omnipotent term which is used to justify everything, including the killing of the 17-year-old boys that we were talking about at the very beginning. It's all for security,